Much of the good in a design, even an exquisite design, can be undermined by poor spacing. Let's talk about it. Visual logic. So much in graphic design comes down to what I call visual logic. It means that things look right together, appropriate, and like they belong that way. I think that elements in a design set up visual expectation of how things ought to work together. If something doesn't fit that expectation, it can be jarring. If it is done deliberately and with some skill, it can be a focal point. On the other hand, if it is done without forethought and considering what is being done, it can just come off as awkward and poorly designed. This can be especially true in spatial considerations of branding. Logos versus signature sizes. Logos and monograms usually require an accompanying signature. A logo and a signature together constitute the identity. A notable exception is Apple. When your company is as well known as Apple, you can omit the signature. Logos and signatures shouldn't fight each other. The beginning designer will naturally care more about the logo than the signature because that was the part that was usually more labor-intensive compared with the signature. Some want to display the logo big and the signature small, but this is a mistake. There should be a harmony between the logo and the signature. Size relationships should be balanced. There is no benefit to having size relationships that are jarring or spaces between elements that do not look natural. Visual logic is one way to accomplish good spacing. That is simply that shapes and sizes that are repeated make visual sense to our eyes. They seem natural, expected, right. Gaps or spaces between elements of an identity that are based on visual logic don't call attention to themselves. After all, if the spaces drew one's attention instead of the elements, that would be counterproductive design. One of the worst options is to have a space be indefinite. How can anyone know if they have the right spacing when the spaces have not been specified? This is why it is important to make measurements not in millimeters or points or inches, but in units that come from the identity type or other elements. That way they are internally consistent and always repeatable, scalable, and avoid complex math. Here we have my rule of thumb. Suggestions for maximum size of a logo when it is at the side of a signature. I suggest that a logo not be bigger than 1 3/4 times the cap height of the signature. If it is bigger, it may look like Pac-Man eating the signature. It makes sense to align the elements if possible, such as the aligning of the bottom of the logo with the bottom of the descender in the signature. Another factor is the amount of space between the logo and the signature. If the space in between the logo and the signature is much more than the cap height of the signature, the elements will not appear to belong together. If the logo is too close, it will interfere with the instant reading of the signature, weakening the identity's effectiveness. The smallest size I recommend for the logo when it is at the side of the signature is 1 1/4 times the cap height of the signature. If it is smaller, then that will appear insignificant. When the logo is above the signature, in a vertical format, the identity will usually look balanced when the logo is bigger than when it is at the side. About 2 times the cap height of the signature is the maximum logo size. A common vertical space between logo and signature is the X height of the signature, starting from either the signature X height or the cap height. Other factors can influence what will look balanced, including the size and weight of the signature. The number of words in the signature may also make a difference. A 2-word signature would need a larger logo than when the signature words are stacked. If the signature is all caps, it may need a proportionately larger logo to balance. Still, the above rules of thumb are good starting places. About the smallest logo size when placed vertically would be 1 1/2 times the cap height. The X height could still be a logical vertical space between the logo and the signature, measured from the X height. Clear space. Every identity needs a certain amount of space that belongs to it alone. Nothing else may come into this clear space, not even the company's own return address on stationery, for instance. Clear space is measured from the outside of the perimeter of any parts of an identity. Individual signature descenders are sometimes excluded from this perimeter calculation, or they may be included, as in the sample shown here. The clear space should never be less than the X height of the signature. Many times it is the cap height of the signature, occasionally even more. Notice that measurements for clear space, as well as all other spatial measurements, have been made not using inches, points, or millimeters. All measurements have been internal to the identity, such as the signature's X height or cap height. Not only does this make all measurements automatically scalable, but it is also a natural way to achieve visual logic. It is a standard practice to have clear space for all identities. Note that this is measured from the outer edge of the whole identity, not just the logo. Some companies shown here did not give their identities enough clear space. This will result in crowding the identity in various design situations, a visual disrespect to the identity. Recommended absolute minimum clear space is the signature's X height. Slogan versus corporate activity phrase. Many well-known companies have slogans that they incorporate into alternate variations of their corporate identity. These slogans tend to change over time according to new marketing directions. Some examples are McDonald's, I'm loving it; FedEx, when there is no tomorrow; IBM, solution for a small planet; Coca-Cola, open happiness; Nike, just do it; KFC, finger licking good. But slogans are not for everyone. They only work for companies that are so well known that they don't need to tell people what they do, or companies whose name is so descriptive that there is no need to explain further. All other companies should not use a slogan. What they need instead is a corporate activity phrase, CA phrase for short. Some brief words or words that can explain what they do. When I was a teen, I saw trucks driving around with the name Purolator on them and nothing else. What's a Purolator, I thought. Maybe they made machines that have really good tasting coffee by filtering it. Percolator, Purolator. Apparently I wasn't the only one who didn't know who they were or what they did, because a few years later they began to add the single word courier on their truck identities. That's a corporate activity phrase, or CA phrase. It is important in out-of-context situations like on vehicles and signage. A business named Murphy's could be a men's clothier, a restaurant, or a funeral home. Without a corporate activity phrase included with their identity, much of their advertising, especially that on vehicles, is largely wasted. If I don't already know what Murphy's does and see their vehicles, I still won't know without a corporate activity phrase. The key is that they must be simple and clear. Examples might include tax consultants, industrial robots, pharmaceuticals, natural foods, divorce lawyers, hydrogen fuel engines. For any businesses like these, and a million other ones not as famous as FedEx, a CA phrase, not a slogan, should be incorporated into the identity for use whenever it is out of context or when a viewer might not already know what the company does. It goes on business cards, but perhaps not on the letterhead, because the letter can explain it better if needed. It goes on signage and vehicle graphics. It goes on ads and brochures. When a corporate activity phrase is used, it is considered part of the identity. The best place for it is under and smaller than the signature. It should be in the same color as the signature to avoid drawing undue attention to itself. The ideal spacing is to have a gap between it and the signature equal to the corporate activity phrase's own cap height. That space always works, depending on the existence and depth of any signature descenders and on the length and height of the activity phrase and its visual logic. Logo aspect. Word marks tend to be much wider than they are tall. And there are successful logos of just about any shape, tall, wide, irregular, etc. Even so, there is a natural advantage to having a logo with close to equal height and width. Squares and circles, for instance, are more versatile than shapes of more extreme aspect. That doesn't mean that they can't be used. It just means that they are less versatile in different design layouts. One of the advantages of having a logo separate from a signature is that there can be different arrangements. Logos with the same vertical and horizontal dimensions, or close to it, are inherently easier to work along with a signature than a logo of extreme aspect. When these principles of visual logic are practiced with care, there is usually an increased aesthetic appeal added to any identity design. For more information, go to logodesigntheory.com. If you found this useful, be sure to like this video, subscribe, and share this with anyone who needs to know more about logo design.